Hi, Gemini Sun and Rising. Welcome to your July 2025 Astro Update. It's Raina here. It's really funny because even though this is Cancer season for the first few weeks and then becomes Leo season, Gemini is featured prominently. And one of the big ways is because Uranus is going into your sign on the 7th of July. And that's a watershed moment because Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018. Now, it will dip back into Taurus later in 2025 into 2026. So we're not done with that sign yet, but we're at least dipping our toes into Gemini. We're also going to have several retrogrades in July, including your ruler Mercury. I feel like we just came off of a Mercury retrograde already, even though that was March into April. It just seemed like that one was really a doozy. So it's like, oh gosh, once again, yeah, there are like four retrogrades a year. I think some years there are five. I don't know. I might be wrong about that. Maybe it's three and then occasionally there are four. But it's it's always interesting to say the least. So I'm going to start with the first major transit, and that's Venus going into Gemini. See, that was the other planet that was going into Gemini. And you could say, well, big whoop, Venus goes into Gemini every year, right? Well, yeah, but the thing is that usually Venus would have gone into Gemini earlier in the year, closer to May or even maybe even April period, because it's close to the sun. I should say May or June. And here we are in July. And that's because Venus got delayed. Venus retrograded back at the beginning of March. And that was in Aries. And then it kind of lagged behind. That's just how it works. But because these are personal planets, they snap back very nicely. And so there are actually going to be two transits of Venus this month. And so the first one in your sign makes you irresistible, Gemini. So whatever it is, because this is your first house, if you're trying to attract something or someone to you, this is a great time for that to happen. Because the first house is the house of the self. So when Venus is there, you may feel like you have this magnetic pull or something. If you're trying to get a job, you can charm your potential employer. If you're trying to promote your business, sell your wares, that can be very helpful as well. Or, somebody who's dating or trying to find a date. That could be great for you too. So you become very magnetic, very charming, and you may even have the urge to beautify yourself in some way. It could be as simple as buying, a nice outfit, but it could be that you want to get a certain hairstyle. Who knows? And you might say, well, that's kind of superficial. Well, Venus can be about the exterior because it's aesthetic. So it's like anything that's beautiful, Venus loves that because there's a harmony to it. And, that's part of life as well. It might not be the deepest thing, but it's very pleasant. Venus is about pleasure, so you might be very pleasure seeking at this time. On the same day, Neptune goes retrograde at 3 degrees of Aries. So one transit, and this is, like I said, this is both on the same day, which by the way, July 4th is the birthday of the United States. So if you're American, the 4th of July is a holiday. And so that could be like having Venus in your sign during a holiday. You might meet somebody at a 4th of July picnic, something like that. But on the same day, Neptune goes retrograde at 3 degrees of Aries, and that for you is your 11th house, which is the house of the collective and the house of hopes and wishes. So what is interesting about that is that Venus can be your values. And this may be a time, and when I shouldn't say values, I should say what you value, because values, it can be ethics, and that's more like Jupiter. But like what do you place great importance on in life? Gemini. Usually for Gemini, it's going to be freedom and mental pursuits and novelty. Gemini, if you want to torture a Gemini, have them do the same thing every day for the next 40 years. So that kind of, and to have to stay in one place. That's a great way to torture a Gemini person. Gemini is a sign that thrives on change because you're ruled by Mercury, and the word mercurial means changeable. But also that mental stimulation is something that you need. So with Neptune retrograde in the 11th house, it can be a disillusionment regarding the people that surround you socially. And that can also include groups that you belong to, because this is Aquarius's house, and Aquarius is an air sign like you are, Gemini, and it has the same theme of kind of communicating with, in this case would be with others, whereas you rule the 3rd house, which is like you communicating, you learning, you teaching, you writing. And so when Neptune is in the 11th house, it becomes extremely idealistic, because it also can be about society at large. Like you may have some dreams, talking about the 5th dimension or New Earth. That really is Neptune in the 11th house. It's like the collective, the grassroots. How are we, and of course Pluto and Aquarius can touch upon similar themes. But how can we create this ideal world and where we can rely on each other, and it's not like a top-down type of society where we have these authority figures telling us what to do, but it's kind of like, you could call it bottom up, but you can just say grassroots. And yet, even with, these ideals, there can be little cracks in the facade that keep people from realizing those dreams, because sometimes dreams are not workable. They're not practical. And that's where Saturn comes in, because Saturn is also in Aries in that house as well. And I will get to that retrograde in a few minutes, because that's happening as well. But Saturn is a great checks and balance for Neptune, because Neptune is like this wild-eyed dreamer, and Saturn is the manifester. And you may have a friend who you really counted on, who you find out has been deceiving you, that kind of thing. It could be something where you discover that someone that you thought was trustworthy is not, or that a group that you belong to wasn't what they claimed to be. And even some of your hopes and wishes, which this house can relate to, can feel like they are beyond reach, but they may just need reworking, and that's what Saturn will bring when it goes retrograde. On the 7th, Uranus goes into Gemini, into your sign, into that first house, and that will create a real need for freedom. If, some Geminis are already practicing that, but for those who have kind of not really, allowed themselves, gave themselves permission to follow their bliss, this can be a period in the next 7 years when you really break free from a lot of constraints. Yes, I feel like this can, the first house can also be the way that you behave and even the way that you look. So, it's important to note that I'm doing this reading for the sun and the ascendant. And if you are listening to this for Gemini ascendant, your sun sign can be anything. You might be a Cancer sun sign, and you are more traditional, and you are afraid to kind of be your own person in some ways, and even like express it in terms of how you look and act. This can be a time when you feel a sense of liberation. Uranus is kind of like this liberating energy. So it should be kind of an interesting period of time for you. And I think I'm going to do a separate video that's going to be more in depth on how Uranus will affect each sign. So stay tuned for that. On the 10th, we have a full moon at 18 degrees of Capricorn. And this, for Gemini, is your 8th house. Capricorn is a pretty dry sign. It's an earth sign. And Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So it's not like people who have their natal moon in Capricorn tend to be very dry people when you talk to them. Like, even if they have like a juicy sun sign, like let's say Leo or something, or even like Gemini, where it's very witty or amusing, or in the case of Leo, very self-expressive. It takes on this dry quality. But for you, because it's falling in your 8th house, this can make it quite intense because it will have a sub-influence of Scorpio. The 8th house in astrology is ruled by Scorpio. You just happen to have Capricorn in that house. And so this can bring up the shadow self. It can bring up secrets for sure, whether it's yours or others. But anything that can transform you, this is what the 8th house is all about. Usually I talk about like the psychic full moon. I mean, full moons can be psychic, but I mean, when it falls in the 12th house in Pisces domain, but definitely when it falls in the 8th house, it can be psychic as well. But to me, it's almost more like we would characterize it as psychological insight into other people, which may be necessary because you might be dealing with heavy kinds of issues for one reason or the other. But it can be very cathartic. It can be very purging. And that's a good thing. I mean, it can make you aware of something within yourself. A lot of Geminis like to be light and airy and above it all and not have to deal with heavy emotions. But sometimes it's vital in order to grow and to be able to even pinpoint psychological issues that are holding you back, because the 8th house can be psychology as well. And somebody asked me, like, how do you do shadow work? And what I came to realize is that psychotherapy is shadow work, really. But the problem is that it has to be done at the highest level. It can't just be, tell me about the past, because there has to be the bigger picture that is brought into it so that a person can understand why their suffering matters, why it's not just okay, this and that, okay, first this thing happened to you, then that happened. It's not just about what happened to you, but how you reacted to it and how it has affected your life and what value does it have. Because and that's the thing. So therapists who really kind of are in tune with that thing are very valuable, and hopefully there are a fair number of them who have like spiritual backgrounds, because that to me is what shadow work is really about. But it has to combine not just therapy, but also spirituality, so that we can take it and make it into something good as we integrate those traumas or whatever they are. So anyway, this can also be some kind of a development. The eighth house is other people's money, so that can come out in some way. You may find out that somebody has been very shady about shared resources. Hopefully it's not your spouse who you find out has racked up this big debt. that would be like a full moon to remember, because there would probably be a few choice words that would be exchanged during that full moon. On the 10th of the month, okay, is that the 10th? Yeah, that's the 10th. Okay. On the 13th, Saturn goes retrograde at 1 degree of Aries. So Saturn doesn't get very far into Aries before it goes retrograde in that 11th house. So when Saturn is in the 11th house, a person may be like, okay, I'm ready to have my dreams come true. And I typically do not look at a person's like career ambitions as part of that. I see that as, that's the 10th house. The 11th house to me is everything else, all the other dreams that you have. And sometimes it may, kind of connect with career in the sense that you may have thought that you had to have a certain type of career in order to earn a living. And then you say to yourself, I want to wake up every day and I want the thing that I am concentrated on for hours at a time to be the thing that not only what I make money doing, but what really fulfills me. Because I think ultimately our hopes and wishes are so that we can feel happy more of the time. And yet sometimes it feels like impossible to make that happen. And that's why Neptune here can help you to dream big and really hold that vision. But Saturn brings it down to reality. But when Saturn is retrograding and Neptune is retrograding, you may feel like your dreams are slipping away from you. And that's not true. It's just that there has to be reworking in order to make it viable. And then on the 18th, Mercury goes retrograde at 15 degrees of Leo. And this is in your third house, the house that you rule. Oh my goodness, a Mercury retrograde in the third house. How does that work? Well, that's when you really have to be careful of what you say and what you hear, because it can easily get distorted, confused. Any paperwork, any documents, sometimes we have to sign things, mail things during Mercury retrogrades because they happen several times a year, like I said. So Sometimes you have to do those things, but just be extra careful. You may be rethinking a writing project or revising it. You may be rethinking a teaching career, if that's something you're doing, or if you're taking some kind of certification course. Maybe it's been delayed. On the 22nd, the sun goes into Leo, into this sector that you rule. So you're really aligned with that. When the sun goes into Leo, it's actually activating the house that you rule. So that's awesome. And then 2 days later, on the 24th, we have a new moon in Leo, only at 2 degrees, but that's really emphasizes the new moon energy of like new things coming in this case, into that house of communication. And social media is part of that, and any kind of writing project, blogs. Because this is during a Mercury retrograde, it's not necessarily, the timing isn't necessarily aligned with starting a writing project. However, you use your own judgment with that, because sometimes, especially since you rule this house, that can be a strong urge and influence, and maybe it would go right for you. I have said this before. I heard two spiritual teachers, like modern spiritual teachers, well, one of them is like more of a manifestation type of a personality or coach. And both of them launched programs during Mercury retrogrades. They're not, astrologers, but they know of it. And they knew that they had done that. So one of them used the explanation that she said, I don't think that Mercury has that much of an effect over my life. And of course, you could just say that it's defying this kind of matrix system that astrology might even be under as well. But I'm wondering if these people, because both of them are wildly successful, if they actually have insider information about astrology that the rest of us poor schmucks don't have. Well, I shouldn't say poor schmucks. Let's say rich schmucks. I want to be like law of attraction. But, the rest of us. But definitely when the new moon is in the third house, it can even be thinking about something in a different way. Or the way that you take in information. Social media, is a time to develop a new relationship with social media. Maybe you're on it too much. Gee, I wonder how many Geminis can identify with that. So set your intentions, which can be as simple as even just like kind of thinking about this area of life and thinking if there are new ways to approach it. And if you have any kind of writing projects or anything like that, how would you like to go about it? On the 30th, Venus goes into Cancer, and that's your second house of earned income. So remember that Jupiter is already there. So Venus is joining Jupiter in your second house, and both of these planets are called benefic planets, and they do have connections with money already. I mean, Venus in astrology rules the second house in the sign of Taurus. So that is a direct connection, but Jupiter can also be about abundance. And in the second house, it can be financial abundance. So that's very auspicious for money. And then that is going to carry over into August, of course. Okay, Gemini, that's what I have for you. I hope that you enjoyed this and are looking forward to July. If you would like a private reading, you can check out my individual readings. I have package deals, which are discounted because you're buying either two, or I even have like three, including a tarot reading called The Whole Enchilada. You can find out more information at the link below. Thanks for listening. Bye.